Greetings, viewers. Today, we are obviously, as the title of the video tells you, going to be taking a look at replacing the optical drive in a Power Macintosh G4 of the Sawtooth variety, which you can see here. I believe that this is the 450 megahertz AGP version, but this should pretty much apply to anything that shares the same case, which would be practically all of these Sawtooth style. I believe that's what they called this design. The Sawtooth Power Macintosh G4s. First things first, you need to actually have a suitable optical drive to install. I've got one here. Faceplate color doesn't matter, as long as it's IDE. We'll check out the jumper ring later, but there's a drive here. Nothing particularly fancy. You want to make sure the system's turned off. That goes pretty much without saying. But don't unplug it. Why? Well, we'll see in just a minute. The first step after shutting the machine down is to pull open the side panel. Pretty inane procedure, not really much to it. Just opens like that. Now, we're using the power supply as a ground. That is why you want to leave it plugged in. Next step is there are some tabs here at the front. You want to push these in so that this little front piece here pops out, just like that. Next, we got the first use of a screwdriver. These two screws in the front need to come out of the machine. Now you've done that, you can slide this tray forward just enough to be able to access these ribbon cables at the back. So that would be the IDE cable here and the power cable. If you've got your zip drive installed, you'll want to remove that as well. And then the next step, I guess we'll remove it from the case too. The next step is to pull this whole assembly out, assuming it will come out. It should just come out. Well, I guess this is in the way. It should just come out. Is violence required? I didn't think violence was required. But I guess you got to remove this first. It's not what the directions say, but there you go. I am working from directions. But so there's your first little snag. You got to remove that little metal piece before you pull it out, apparently. Alright, the next step is to remove these 4 screws from the outside of the cage, at which point the drive should be free. Looks like we're going to need a bit smaller screwdriver for that. Once you've removed those 4 screws, it should, in theory, slide out of the front, like that. This is a very interesting drive in that it's got a little silver faceplate. I don't know if that's normal, if this is a factory drive. I don't see an Apple logo on it, so I suspect it is not. It's very heavy. So now we'll check out our jumper ring on the back. Make sure that our new drive, which I've misplaced, like a boss, is jumpered for the same thing, which it is not. So the old drive is jumpered for cable select. I'm going to jumper the new one for cable select as well. Just because I know that Macintoshes are a little bit finicky about that. Installation is basically exactly the reverse of removal. Might require a little bit of force, but it is installed, so now we can put in our screws, just loosely at first. Put them in the rest of the way later. It's always the last one that's tricky. Alright, so, because I have noticed, if we look here, this drive appears to be shorter than the drive that I pulled out. I'm going to install this in the case, as per the directions, hopefully correctly. I guess that's correct. I'm going to take our little shield, and I'm going to thread the cables through the shield, but I'm not going to install the shield just yet, because I suspect that this is going to be a pain to try and install these cables. Well, it's not as much of a pain as I thought it was going to be, but better safe than sorry, right? So, the last other thing I need to do, I might just use this one. But that's probably not a good idea. I'm going to have to figure out how to thread this cable through the shield. Since I don't ever plan on putting a zip drive in here, I'm just going to use this connection. You probably should use the existing connection. Again, do as I say, not as I do. But I don't think for the purposes of this that it's going to matter much. Of course, the next step is to actually put the shield back on, which is not really the step that they tell you to do, but I don't care. So I've got the shield back in place, and I'm going to put the drive cage back in place as well, just like that. Again, working from the front of the case. Like I said, installation is the reverse process. We'll take our screws, and we will screw this back in place. Just like that. And then, making sure to get it positioned correctly, we will install the front panel piece, just like that. Works nicely. Close up the side panel, and hook it back up again. We're now ready for power up. Theoretically, well, we would be if I actually plugged in the monitor. So, if everything worked out, what you should have now is a newly replaced optical drive that reads discs. Let's flip that on. We have our display. Power to the Macintosh unit itself. My optical drive eject works. It's a little crooked, but it works. In case it gets stuck on that. And it is actually booting, which is nice. Previously, what would happen is I'd put it away and it would stop working. So it's good that it is actually working. There are directions. I will link to them in the video description for this. You can do like I did and print them off. Probably actually easier that way, so you don't have to keep going over to a computer and having to scroll wildly all over the place, because they tell you to reference figures, and they put the figures all the way at the end of the document, which is kind of annoying. They're not inline, like I think they should be. But, oh well, that's the way they did it. So I'm going to double check the date and time on this, which appears to be completely incorrect. So, that's the last thing I'm going to do. I'm going to set the date and time. And then we can conclude the video. But I don't really have much of a use for this machine, so I don't really do much with it. Yeah, it's going all the way back to 1969, which is a very interesting thing. Most PCs go back to at least somewhat around the era that they were produced in, when their time goes bad. That's roughly close. It's probably going to revert. I'm going to unplug it and it'll revert again, because I don't think the battery's any good. But that's not really the scope of this video, so thank you for watching. If you have any comments, questions, feel free to leave them down below. And this is CP666 signing off, and I hope to see you next time. Till then.